Hi, friends. Welcome to the Crush the Rush podcast. I'm Holly, and after 600 episodes and over 6 years of showing up to this mic, I realized I've never actually introduced myself. So here we are. In this episode, I am sharing the full story of how I went from corporate strategist and twin mom with a really big bus stop dream to running a 7-figure life-first business that helps thousands of women build their own quietly powerful success. So you'll hear my biggest philosophies, what I wish I started out knowing, how I help women grow without the hustle and without social media, and a little behind the scenes of things that we're working on now. So if you're craving strategy that respects a real life, you are in the right place. Go ahead and hit subscribe and give this video a like and comment with your own bus stop dream below. I would love to hear it. Hi, friends. Welcome back to the Crush the Rush podcast. If you have been listening to the podcast over the last few episodes, you know that the podcast this year is our anchor. It is our anchor content, is our anchor project, and we're doing all kinds of things behind the scenes to really make our podcast the thing, right? Like all of the strategy, all of our focus is going behind the podcast. And so I was talking to my podcast team about our strategy and sort of what our focus was. And they were like, Holly, what's the episode that you did when you introduced yourself? And I was like, what are you talking about? And they assumed that I had done an episode years ago because we're 6 years in now to this podcast, which is crazy, that talked about who I was and what I did and why I did it. And I was like, no, I didn't do that. Like I just started recording. I just started jumping right in. I recorded the first episode in my basement. Like I didn't know any better. So of course, you know, hundreds of thousands of downloads later, it feels important that we have the origin story of this podcast on the podcast, but not necessarily the origin story of like how I started the podcast, but the origin story of me and our business and our mission and our vision, and even layering in some lessons learned along the way. So as this podcast is approaching almost 500,000 downloads, which is crazy, that's the goal this year, I was like, okay, maybe I should do this episode. So here we go. That is what this episode is. This episode is the story of how Crush the Rush came to be, not just the podcast, but the brand, the business, and how I got started. So as one might say in the trendy world, it's the origin story. And so if you're new around here, hi, I'm Holly. And I wanted to take a minute to just tell you who I am, how I got here, and actually how I help and what I do to help you grow. Because I think context matters. And I do think knowing the person behind the microphone, behind the courses and community matter. Like who you work with matter. Who's in your community matters. And so I also am like, wow, it's kind of weird that we're going on 5 years now, 6 years now, 600 episodes, and I've never done this. So also just a reminder that you can start wherever. And as long as you start, it's okay. There's no one right way to do things, right? So let's start back to I hired a business coach before I had a business era, which was in January of 2020. So I decided that I was going to go all in and hire a business coach because I did not have online business experience. So I did not have an online business. And if you're keeping track of this, this is a 5-figure investment with no income coming in. And I've told the story before. I didn't tell anyone about it. I didn't tell my husband. I was like, I'm just doing it. We're going all in. I would not recommend that piece of it. You should definitely tell somebody and probably discuss it with your spouse first. But the good news is the corporate job sort of helped cover that investment. And I wanted to say that piece out loud because when I started, I didn't know what I didn't know. And I started before I had everything figured out. And I started because I was like, inside, I knew that I needed to do something differently. And so one of the stories that I have told a million times on everyone else's podcast is when this little feeling inside of me actually turned into, I should do something about this. And so this is where I talk about the Jenny's ice cream story. Now, you may have heard this story before if you're following along. If you're new, Jenny from Jenny's Ice Cream, Jenny Brittenbauer is her name. She is from Columbus, Ohio. She started this amazing ice cream store. Gosh, it's probably been at least 20 years, 15 years, 20 years. I'm not sure. She's very popular now. But at the time that I was in grad school, she was just getting started. So she had this like little store downtown. And one of my finance professors was like, Jenny from, Jenny's Ice Cream is coming to talk to you. And I just remember thinking like, okay, well, this is going to be interesting. Like she's probably going to go through like, I don't know, her spreadsheets or something because it was finance class. And instead, what she talked about was the reason behind why she wanted to build Jenny's Ice Cream. And it really wasn't about the ice cream. It was about a creative space for her. It was about being a part of the community. And if you follow her now, that's a huge role for her. And of course, it's grown like massively. I think it's nationwide now. So, and I just remember sitting in the back of the class being like, this is interesting. This is not what I expected. And I don't think I'm on the right path. Which, when you're at this point, 15 years into your career and on track to graduate from grad school and then work another 3 years to pay it back. And you're like, no, I'm not on the right track. That's a moment, right? And so I just remember sitting there like, I don't know if I can keep doing what I'm doing without like some sort of impact tied to it. Like I need the impact piece. And so it just got me thinking that one, this story had a huge impact on me. Two, maybe I should invite her on the show one day. That would be really cool. But three, it's really important how this story played along and how we got started. Because like I said, I was, 15 years into business. I then had to go back, to work to pay off the grad school. And then I ended up having twins. And so now fast forward, we're like 5 to 6 years later, and the girls are really, really little, and I'm driving to work. It's dark out. And I just remember sitting in the car, like at a traffic light, and I was like, I don't know if I can keep doing this. And it was the same feeling that I had in the Jenny's Ice Cream story in the back of class in grad school. And I was like, this is not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that I've had this same feeling multiple times and like, I'm not doing anything about it. Like, what am I doing about this? And so what I decided to do, because entrepreneurship was still not on the table yet, was what can I do in my corporate job to make me feel better about the path that I was on? Can I give back? Can I volunteer? Can I mentor? And so that's what I did. And at the time, Lean In was a really big book by Sheryl Sandberg. And so I started a women's leadership group in the company that I worked for. I started volunteering more. And then I was like, I keep getting asked the same questions about how I am prioritizing different things at different times because the girls were still really little. Maybe I should create a podcast. And so that's honestly where our business started. It was from this dream of I need to do more to feel like I am part of something. And it came from little stories along the way. And so that's when I hired the business coach. That's where I was like, I got to figure out how to do this. So help me launch a podcast. What should it be about? All of the things. Once I got started, I was like, wow, wouldn't it be great if I was able to launch a podcast and a business, because there's a business behind it, that would allow me the flexibility to do something meaningful and put my kids on the bus. Like how great would that be, right? And so that's really where story number 2 comes in that I tell quite often, and that is the bus stop dream. And so, we're in January of 2020, and I'm like, let's start a podcast. Then we're in March of 2020, and there's this little thing called the pandemic that happens. At the same time that the first episode of the podcast goes live, the very first case of COVID hit the United States, and I was like, okay, what do we do here? Because remember, I've invested in this process. And while the rest of the world is not invested in it, I'm like, I have 2 kindergartners at home. We've got a business coach to pay for. I have a full-time job and I got to figure this out. But also, I want the bus stop dream. And so the bus stop dream is really what guided me through all of the pandemic. What if I could figure out a way to run a business where I could put my kids on the bus, get them off the bus, not have to take PTO, and have a career. At this point, I really didn't know if my business was going to make enough money to do that, but I knew that it would provide something. So maybe I could do both. Maybe I could work part-time for a while. Maybe there was some magical mystery schedule that I hadn't figured out. And so for almost 2 years, that's what I did. The podcast came out every single week. We dabbled in different programs, different courses. I very quickly found out that courses by themselves were not my thing. I really loved community, and we were managing, pandemic kindergarten at home. And so if you don't remember that time frame, I will say there's a little bit of a period of blackout, which I joke about now. But if you were to ask me about raising twins at an early age, I joke that I don't remember. Like, I literally don't remember. So when they were babies, it's like my brain protected me and deleted the files. And I sort of feel like this is what happened in 2020. Like, I really don't remember how I did it. Like, I would have to go back and listen to the podcast, because the podcast is where I documented how we were doing all the things, like how I was launching a program, how that program didn't work out, how I then decided to launch a mastermind, like from the beginning, because I knew that I wanted to work with really high caliber women, and I knew that I didn't have a lot of time to do anything else. And so this is where really the whole life first strategy started taking shape, because the season forced me to build a business that could survive real life. You couldn't be fake online, but also I didn't have time to be online. So the podcast was our outlet, and it was very real life, like real life, where I was recording in the basement. Someone was crying in the background. I was taking client calls at like 7 a.m. before I had to get on to my corporate job. And it was like, okay, like B- is passing. I'm going to get through this phase. And so this is a really interesting phase, because that led to, how do we do this full time? In full time, meaning like, how do we transition to not working my corporate job? And I will tell you, the bus stop dream is what drove this, because I did not want to go back to work. That was the driving factor. I had now been home for 2 years, and I had gotten a taste of the bus stop dream. So when you hear like coaches or manifestation experts say, like, if you want the dream home, like, go drive around the neighborhood or walk around the neighborhood where your dream home existed. That's exactly what I did, but on accident. Like, I got a taste of what it was like to work from home, to not have to have a commute, to be able to do laundry in the middle of the day. And I was like, I don't want to go back. And so here's something I think people don't realize. And this is the second time I've said this, I really don't think I ever thought I would make enough money to cover my corporate salary. I have worked for Fortune 500 companies for 20 plus years. I was the main income producer in our family. My husband decided to stay home with our girls when they were born, because 2 newborns in daycare is insane. And entrepreneurship to me felt like pure chaos. It's not something that I was trained in. I didn't know anything about it, but I did know business and I did know strategy. And so I had to really think about, is this possible? And I will share, and we could do a whole nother episode about this, leaving the benefits of a full-time corporate job felt very overwhelming. So that was a setup. I had a corporate job. I was a brand new online business owner. I had twins. We went through the pandemic, and this tiny little business dream that I was building was built in the margins, like literally the margins of the day, which is where CEO week came from, because I had 8 hours or less a week to build this business. So one thing I did do as we talk about this origin story is, if you want the practical details of what we did to have everything in place to leave corporate, I did do an episode on that. And that's episode 176. You got to go way back, but it is very emotional. And then we also did an episode, it's episode 382, where looking back, here's what I would do now, sort of checklist style, if I wanted to leave corporate. And so I mentioned the bus stop dream, but this was really the driver. Like, this is the story. And I tell it on almost every guest episode interview that I've ever been on. But I didn't really care what the in-between looked like. And I don't really need the fanciest business model. I also don't need millions of dollars. I really just wanted to be able to say yes to like the midday dentist appointment, or at the time that I'm recording this, ironically, is a snow day and everyone is home. So I can be the parent on the bus stop and I can adjust when there is school and I can do the things that I want to do to be a present parent and have a career. And so consulting, which was the industry that I was in, did not support that at all. And I wanted both. So in my scenario, I loved my corporate job. I loved my team. I actually miss sometimes that corporate piece of that, which is why I think I'm so in tune with community right now. Some of my best friends came from all of those years, but it just didn't match up with the version of motherhood that I wanted. And so entrepreneurship very clearly became the path, right? It wasn't the office door. It wasn't the title. It wasn't the team. It was the schedule and the life experiences and the ability to be present. And so I talk about now how like the podcast is the anchor of our business. The bus stop dream for me became the anchor. And honestly, it still is, right? Like I can go to the bus stop. We have other lifestyle anchors that we're driving towards. And that's what drives everything. And so the next piece of the story is I didn't really expect this, right? I joke that I'm older, right? I started this journey at 41. I'm about to turn 47 at the time of this recording. And I never, ever, ever thought this would be my path. But once I got a taste of it, I was like, wow, this is really different. This is amazing. But also, this is not easy, right? Because the beginning was tight, right? Tight is the word. Time was tight. Really early mornings, a few late nights. I joke that I'm not a night person. I never have been. I have never pulled an all-nighter ever in my entire life unless we have been traveling time zones. Fun fact, I also never drank caffeine until after college, which I don't even know how that's possible. I do now. But I had to build the confidence, which I think we like forget that part. You could have all the systems and strategy in place, but you have to have the confidence to execute it. And so I had to build the confidence. I had to build the belief. And then I had to take the leap because the safety net was never going to exist. And that's really where having someone believing in you makes the most difference. So my husband was actually the one who was like, Holly, I think you can do this full time. I wasn't there yet. He was. And the reason why is the business coach that I invested in had a retreat. And so I decided to go to said retreat in that lifestyle first way. We decided to make a family vacation out of it because I had to take PTO to go to this retreat. And so I asked if my husband could attend the meetings with me. And he sat there and he listened to some of these business owners talk. And he was like, Holly, you can do this. Like you're doing this for Fortune 500 companies. Like you can do this. And so sometimes I think you just need someone close to you to say, you're already doing it. And so that's really what catapulted me to then leave my corporate job after 2 years of kind of doing it part-time until I was like, okay, we're ready to take the leap. And that's honestly what those 2 episodes talk about is like what happened when I took the leap and what did we have in place to be able to do that. But the fun part of this story, right, is so now we're like in it and let's be honest, not everything works the way that you think it does. And so what I learned very quickly was trying to work in pockets of the day by myself didn't. Like, I'll try to squeeze this in was not a version of the business that I wanted. It wasn't sustainable. And so I had to learn, 1, what I was really good at, and 2, how to ask for help. So the first thing that we did was mapped out our goals and made them very visible. And I talk about this a lot on the podcast of like what our quarterly planning looks like, how we communicate it, how I tell my husband, how it's literally in our downstairs office on the wall. So like our whole family can see it. So my husband, me, our family, the vision that we have is not just business. It's this big vision that the business supports. And it's not just some vague dream floating around in my brain. It was and is, this is what we're doing. This is why. This is why this timeline is a little bit different. This is why mom is really busy right now. But guess what? Tomorrow, this looks different, or we get to do this. And so really having that clarity and the communication and the buy-in from your family, from your team, from yourself. Those are the things that I had to learn really quickly, especially in those early seasons. And it's something that I teach now, right? I teach this constantly, that you should really build systems on relying on energy, because energy changes everything. Capacity changes everything. Life changes. Kids get sick. I talk about on this podcast how hormones change. You get older. The economy shifts. I joke that I've only run a business in a pandemic, financial crisis. I don't even know what's happening in the world right now. And as I record this, like I mentioned, we're in the middle of like an epic snowstorm. So systems protect you when your energy can't, but your capacity is really what is going to change the world for you, like having the capacity to be able to adjust. So why do I actually believe this now? This story, this origin story, really leans into the philosophy that I teach today. So you hear me talk about your business should support you first. I learned that through Jenny, from Jenny's Ice Cream, through the bus stop dream, through figuring out that I didn't want to just be a course creator, through learning how to communicate with my husband and my team, and through outsourcing and hiring. And so that life first schedule matters, and capacity and time management will win every single time. It will also give you more than you could ever give yourself, because when you stop overloading yourself, you start thinking clearly again. And so the cool part about this story is, as I started to very slowly over time get my time back, right, to reclaim it from the craziness of, working at 5 a.m. to going to work all day, to dealing with family and all of that at home, and then, going to bed. As I slowly stripped that away, the creativity came back. And that's really how we got to where we are today. And we've created systems to protect those boundaries, because I always say that I will never go back to the schedule that I had, 10 plus years ago. And I think the interesting part is, it doesn't matter what my boundaries are, you have to create your own. So it doesn't matter what the industry says. It doesn't matter how many hours you work a day. It doesn't matter what Instagram says or someone else's launch calendar says. For you, your boundaries are yours. For us, our boundaries look like this now. I try to work 20 hours or less per week. Yes, there are times when we're sprinting and we're working more, and then there's times where we're working less. Our goal as a family, instead of the bus stop dream, is to travel once a quarter, which has been really fun, because we started this when I left my corporate job as like an on the whim, hey, I don't want to ever sit in meetings all day ever again. And we've been able to go to 11 different countries now in 3+ years, which I can't imagine as like a 10-year-old how that would feel, but I feel like that feels pretty good. And then we set, different anchors, and I've been using that word a lot, to help us stay focused on our schedule, and always the bus stop dream, right? That's always there. So that's the metric. It's not how many posts did I write, it's the bus stop. Like, what does that look like for you? What is your bus stop? And so the other thing that happens behind the scenes is like, how do we make the bus stop dream work? And that is always prioritizing networking and human connection, which you'll hear come through on this podcast. And so the interesting thing about this is I am actually very creative. Like, I love to play in Canva and designing social posts. And I won't say I love making reels, but it's fun for me. Like, it's not something I don't like to do, but it's a huge time suck, and it's not a big return on investment for me. So what is every single networking event I have ever been to has had a returned client in some form or fashion. And every single relationship that I have had has led to another. So that's what I focus on, because that is a win for me, and it feels good, and it protects my time. And then this year, we've really been leaning into SEO. I have become obsessed with it behind the scenes because it's predictable. It compounds. And yes, it's not flashy, right? Like, it's not flashy at all, but everyone now wants quick wins. And so this is not a quick win, but it works. And so, As I'm recording this, we're kicking off our 6th year of our mastermind program, which if you go back to what I said at the beginning, I started in the first 6 months of my business. And the way that people came into this mastermind was through referrals, through Google, through listening to the podcast, through friends. And so to me, having a business that is quiet and predictable and compounding is really what matters the most. The other pieces that I like to talk about is the team. And I didn't build this myself. And I feel like that is important to share. So let's talk about team for a second. It has taken me a really long time to find the right team. And I would say most CEOs in my position would go straight for an OBM and a virtual assistant. I found the best virtual assistant, now community manager in the world. She's been with me for 6 years. But I really struggled with finding the right person for that additional role. And the reason being is I excel at project management. That's my corporate background. That's what I did all day. And so it was really hard for me to hire somebody that did that. And so I really had to focus on, instead of hiring one person to hold everything, like you typically see in like a textbook, I have really focused on building a team who go deep into their zones of genius, right? So podcasting, SEO, sales, community. We have team members in each one of these categories because they are geniuses in these categories, and it helps me stay at that visionary level. So if you're like, Holly, this is great, but like, how did you actually do that? My favorite book on this topic is Who Not How. And so hire people that are better than you. That's the move. And it took me a really long time to figure that out. And as soon as we had the right people in those roles, everything has clicked so much differently, which then goes to the last piece. And that is how I have incorporated AI over the years, which, yes, is part of my origin story because automation helps me a lot. I talk about systems. I talk about email. I talk about funnels and maps and tags for everything. And it sounds so boring, but it's so freeing. It is, to me, an email system is like freedom. And so I talk all the time about client experience, which was actually one of my expertise in my corporate life, and your funnel and your follow-up and how you can actually stop reinventing yourself every single week. And so we've incorporated AI into this, but I will say that to me, human first is what matters. I use AI to brainstorm and to structure, but not to do the work for me. And I think your voice is most important. So I want my strategy. AI helps me get from this like brainstorming blank page to the first draft, but then I make it mine. And so I will say 6 years in, we've had thousands of clients, which is wild to say, but it started with the Jennies, started with ice cream. How's that? Which then led to the bus stop, which then led to, hey, maybe I should create a course because that's what everyone was doing. 4 people purchased it. And I was like, yeah, not my thing, which then led to community, which is where I learned that I thrive. And then it's led to the community and the programs that we have today. And I think the most important part of this story is everyone has an origin story. And it's so important to tell yours because I'm hoping that as you're listening to this, you're like, oh, I could so relate to sitting in the back of the class and having like an aha moment. Or a lot of times I'll share like, I don't feel like my story is this like horrible event that happened, or it wasn't this like big thing. It was like very small pieces over time that added up to make a change. And every single one of you has that story, and every single one of your clients wants to hear your story. How can they relate to you? Maybe you have twins. Maybe you love systems and color coding like I do. Maybe you started with a course and you're like, yeah, not for me, and decided to do something different. Maybe you love AI and you're like, how do I make it human first, right? Maybe there's just like one little piece of my story that is inspiring you to lean into your story differently. And so it is weird for me to sit here and talk about my origin story, but I do feel like it's important because I'm right along here with you. I started with nothing. No one in my family has any experience in entrepreneurship. I have no experience in entrepreneurship, but what I did have, I was able to apply to the space that we're in now. And I think so many of you listening can do that. And so I want to learn alongside with you. I want to share alongside with you. And I hope that you like this little behind the scenes of, how we got to where we are. So hopefully, if you're wondering, well, what's next? The podcast, clearly, because the podcast is everything. Behind the scenes, in the know, best experts, real strategy, client case studies. Like I could just sit up here in my office and talk on the podcast all day long. So that's not going away. We also have a newsletter called Better Together. It comes out every Friday. I think it's become a thing, which I'm proud of. And when I mean every Friday, I mean every Friday. Like I am very consistent and I have not missed a podcast or a Friday in 6 years. I share everything from like what I'm cooking for dinner, how we're navigating pre-tween, now twin daughter status, the strategy maybe of the week that helped us make sales. So it's very business, but also very real life too. And then community and programs. All of our programs are based in community first, human first. These are not for you if you want a quick win. They are for you if you want support, accountability, the best strategy for your lifestyle, and a plan that actually works in real life with somebody like me working on it behind the scenes. So thank you for listening to this story. But also, I wanted to give you something that you could actually do today. So if you listen to this and you're like, cool story, Holly, and then you go right back into the chaos, then you missed the point. Because the point is somebody needs to hear your story. And I want to know what yours is. So here's your really simple assignment. Let's talk about what your life first non-negotiables are. So I want you to get a notebook, open the notes on your phone, and then write these 3 prompts. My bus stop dream is, meaning what's the lifestyle thing that you want to protect against everything? And then what are your 3 non-negotiables this year? Pick 3, not 10. For me, it might be 1 email a week, 1 podcast interview a week, and SEO over social, right? What does that look like for you? And then the system I need to protect my time is what? Email follow-up, a lead magnet, a better onboarding, a weekly plan, or a rhythm. And so the key is, I love a good Pinterest board, but let's make it operational. Like put it on your calendar. Tell somebody your story. Write it where you can see it. Think about your bus stop dream. What is motivating you? And, clarity without structure becomes a wish. And I love wishes, but we need a rhythm. We actually want to make this happen. So that's me. That's how I got here. That's why I teach business the way that I do, because I don't believe that success has to be loud. And I don't believe that it has to be chaotic, but I do believe that you can have a business that fits the life that you're actually living, and you don't have to sacrifice everything to get there. So if you want to go deeper, head on over to hollymariehaynes.com. We always have something going on. Make sure to come back and check the podcast because we've got much more juicy episodes coming. You can go back and I'll link in the show notes the episodes that I mentioned if you are thinking about leaving corporate. And thank you for listening to my story. If you've been listening for a while, thank you. If you're new, thank you. And we're almost to 500,000 downloads, which blows my mind. So we'll see if we reach that goal this year, and I will talk to you next week.